Thank you for joining our fireside chat with Jenny. I'm also Jenny, so this is going to be a very exciting fireside chat. I'm the VP of Customer Success at Everflow, and like I said, I'm talking to Jenny, who is the EVP of Growth at Ringba, and we're going to be talking about pay-per-call landscape and regulations in 2023 and beyond, and how inbound calls are a necessary tool for all lead gen programs. So, Jenny, quick questions about you.
Sure.
Can you introduce yourself? Where are you based? Yeah.
Sure thing. So I'm Jenny Parrish. As Jenny mentioned, I am the EVP of Growth and the GM of the Programmatic Exchange for Ringba. I am based in Southern California in a small town called Moore Park, which is just north of Los Angeles. And yeah, I've been in the industry now, dating myself, over 2 decades, and exciting to be part of the pay per call ecosystem and this big revolution when it comes to calls.
Awesome. And what do you do exactly at Ringba?
Sure, absolutely. So I focus on our newest product, which is called the Ringba X Exchange. It's essentially a programmatic marketplace that brings demand and supply together. So that's my primary focus. But in addition to that, I also oversee strategic partnerships like the ones with Everflow, and also obtaining different programs like the preferred buyer program for the Ringba company, and really kind of expanding our footprint in our ecosystem through partnerships.
Wow, that's a lot that you're doing.
I wear a few hats, but it's all good. I love it.
Oh, that's always makes it more fun. And then quickly, how did you get started in this industry, affiliate marketing, pay-per-call?
Yeah. So funny enough, it was actually my big sister. My sister was in the industry. She started at a boutique email marketing and e-commerce company called High Speed Media many, many, many years ago. And this was back in 2001. So, right after the bubble had burst. And, I was at a company that was a prominent dialysis company, and I realized that the health industry may not have been for me. And she said, look, this is really exciting. This internet thing's going to take off. I really think that you would love it. And so it was all because of my sister. And so she's actually with the trade desk now. So we're both still in the industry, but just kind of in different facets. But I owe it all to my big sister.
Wow, I've never heard a story like that. It's normally just randomly you fall into a job.
Yeah, I know. It was serendipitous. It totally, timing was everything. This was right before affiliate marketing had really started to take off. So funny enough, I see a lot of parallels in early days of affiliate marketing, and pay-per-call. Even though pay-per-call has been around for years and years now, I really feel like we're on the cusp of a lot of gravitation towards inbound calls and pay-per-call in general. And so it feels very similar to those early days of affiliate distribution.
Oh, well, that's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
We will get more into that. One more personal question now. What goals do you want to achieve in 2024 for yourself?
Funny enough, I am looking to learn how to play the piano. That's something that's always been a lifelong dream. I've been in choir and those type of things throughout my whole life. And I've always wanted to learn an instrument. And so I had a big birthday recently. My husband got me a baby grand piano. And so I've started to dabble and learn, and I'm starting to pick it up a little bit more and more, but I'd love to really master it in 2024 as a personal goal. It's something that I'm really passionate about and hope to maybe play for you guys one day.
Yes, please. How do you plan on learning? Is it going to be like online lessons, or you have a teacher coming in?
Both, actually. So I have a music school that's local to me that I go to once a week. In addition to that, I actually have an incredible app that actually hears the keys that you play and lets you know if you're playing the right notes or not. So I get to practice at home. I get to go to a music school locally, and it's going so far so good. I feel like I'm picking it up, and It's not as challenging as I thought it would be, which is sometimes how we look at goals, right? We see that this might be an overwhelming feat to reach, but once we really get into it, we put our passion into it, I think it becomes more achievable and more of a reality.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And
Sure.
like I said, I would love to hear when you're ready. You can do a little Zoom concert for everyone.
I love it. Let's do it.
All right. Going back to pay-per-call, where do you see pay-per-call really fitting into specifically the lead generation landscape?
Yeah. So, what's funny about pay per call is that I think a lot of people are like, who picks up the phone anymore? Like, is calls still a thing? And it's actually the highest form of intent when it comes to lead generation. Is that live caller is really further along in the sales cycle than any form of marketing that we have out there, as far as acquisition, right? And so right now, when you think about the landscape, calls are actually 10, 12 times more likely to convert than any other form of lead generation. There's also a personalization that happens. There's a trust factor when you have a person on the other line. They're answering your concerns. They're really there to answer those questions that may be blockers for them to take action on that. And so I really see pay per call to be further along in the funnel when it comes to the lead generation landscape. But I think it's going to be very critical, especially for a lot of different industries that require that more personal touch. Anything in insurance, financial services, legal services. These are really important discussions that these consumers are really looking for answers and clarity. Sometimes a huge investment, home services. Think of, $30,000 solar panels on your roof. It's not something that you're simply going to fill out a form and have someone show up to install. Similarly to insurance, people might have pre-existing medical conditions, questions about how they can have coverage and protection for their family. It's not really anything that you can fully accomplish, I think, in a digital experience. I think it's something that people will continue to be enthusiastic about reaching the phone, answering their questions. And so while I think that there is some notion that it's really only the aging population, and although Medicare, especially during open enrollment, is huge right now when it comes to picking up the phone and getting that health insurance quote, it's actually coming across in all different age brackets. We see calls flowing through for health insurance as young as 18 years old. Even those that are coming out of college, they're aging out of their parents' plans. They're 26. They need health insurance, and they have a lot of questions because they're unfamiliar with the needs that they're going to require in order to qualify and get something that's affordable. So I think that it's an important part of the lead generation landscape. I think it's something that more and more companies are starting to gravitate towards because it is that much warmer.
Wow. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, if someone's willing to call and talk to a person for 5+ minutes, hopefully plus, that is definitely a highly qualified lead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's interesting. I didn't think about the health insurance and when you just leave college and you're not on your parents' health insurance anymore. That's definitely a time when someone needs to talk to somebody.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah. Then let me rephrase this about people who don't want to get on calls. Why are calls growing in popularity as a way to interact? Like, I think you just mentioned that it does qualify them more, but there's probably more cost to getting these type of leads. So why is this growing so fast?
Yeah, so I think at the heart of our discussion today is the regulatory impact. So from a demand standpoint, or the buyers, those that are fulfilling these policies, or on the other end picking up the phone, there is certainly pressure from a regulatory standpoint to ensure that these consumers are there. It's customer initiated. These are inbound calls that they're looking to really interact with because there is so much regulation around that outbound practices. When you're reaching out to someone versus them reaching out to you, not only is it an intent issue, but there's also regulatory, issues that you would run into, like TCPA, DNC issues. So that's where I see a much significant gravitation towards really having that demand, that buyer going towards that inbound call. So I think it's growing in popularity because there's a lot of pressure around these big organizations to make sure that these customers really want to be contacted. They are there for an intended reason, and you're not just bothering someone just to bother them. It's a kind of a chain of events when it comes to reaching out to a consumer when they might not be ready for that conversation. And so that's why we've seen this huge gravitational pull towards really having that customer initiate that discussion, because at that point they're ready for it. So I think that, typically supply follows demand. The demand is there for that customer initiated inbound. And so we see that gravitation from a supply standpoint. In addition to that, I think it's growing in popularity because there's quite a lot of waste that comes with other forms of lead generation. The consumers can't be contacted. There's other forms that are just not really pulling towards that end goal of getting that consumer to sign up for a product or service. And so this is again, further along in the funnel. So it's really something that is a higher conversion for these companies that are looking for that particular consumer. So I think from overall standpoint, I think the human elements, the personalization, the conversations that need to happen around big purchases, big service decisions, I think all of that is why calls are really growing. But I really think that it's pressure on the regulatory systems that is really coming from the top. The U.S. government has very specific sights set on protecting the consumer audiences, and so that's why when it's customer initiated, you're essentially in the clear.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's so many laws, and also people have cell phones now. They're not going to just answer anybody. So yeah, having the customer initiate the call is the perfect way to get around that. So you have mentioned the regulations and how you've mentioned the regulations. Can you give us examples of some of these regulations and how they've impacted the pay-per call space, or how they will, if they haven't gone through yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think that open enrollment or AEP currently for Medicare is a great example. I mean, I know that there's a lot of marketers that are focused on Medicare, and they have had to make significant adjustments to ensure that they're CMS compliant. And in addition to that, we have seen that outbound is something that is not really looking to be welcomed in that ecosystem. I think that CMS has put in certain specifications of how they need marketing interacted to protect the consumers, to make sure that they're not getting in trouble. And honestly, we have even seen, huge companies like a Health IQ that due to, unfortunately, their outbound dialing practices, that company had to shutter. That affected thousands of people, including a lot of people within our industry that were affected in a significant way, in addition to thousands of people losing their jobs. So just seeing those type of large companies that can collapse under a regulatory pressure or certain practices that aren't welcomed by these regulatory bodies, it's a clear example of how businesses have to be built today. I think that it's important for us to understand that there are other regulatory issues that are on the horizon. One that is something to note, the FCC is really looking to expand the TCPA landscape, calling it close the lead generation loophole. I think this is one that, there's certainly been some attention in our industry, but I want to make sure that I kind of point to it because it's a really important one to keep an eye on. And that's basically passing on consent. As we all know, in lead generation, someone may sign up for a particular lead or product, and then that information is then sold to multiple parties. The FCC is really looking to close that loop because they're seeing, calls kind of out of control when it comes to all of these folks. Multiple people are dialing at the same time, just really overwhelming a consumer and making it a really negative experience. This would affect pretty much all of lead generation when it came to anybody that is buying data, anybody that is accessing data that may be in a shared environment, even some of the larger organizations out there like a lending tree that might splinter off that particular consumer's information to get multiple bids, they would even be affected. So from the small to the large organizations out there, this could be something that could be heavily impactful and something that needs to be watched very closely, because those practices of kind of listing 100 companies as associated with your organization is not going to be compliant anymore. They're going to really tighten up on who is going to be able to access that consumer information to contact that consumer. So it's going to be highly limiting for a lot of different industries, including email marketing, lead generation, data sales. It kind of is a domino effect for a lot of different industries within the lead generation landscape and consumer acquisition in general, if this does come through. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. CMS, in kind of going back to AEP, they put in a lot of different, regulations and laws and issues and all kinds of stuff that a lot of us have to keep an eye on, in addition to everything else about standard marketing practices. I think that really understanding those is going to be the key to having businesses survive. The good thing that we have noticed is that although CMS put a ton of regulations on a lot of different, the Medicare space specifically, we have only seen AEP grow this year. So what's exciting to know is that even though with this regulatory environment that is very specific, it's very harsh, the businesses in our industry are adapting and they're actually flourishing, they're growing, and we're not seeing the impact from a volume standpoint of the capabilities of generating revenue within these highly regulatory environments.
Wow. Okay, thank you. I have a question. You briefly said that the new regulations could also prevent people from using a ping tree in the back to sell their leads. That's true? So
yeah, that exactly it, right? So because in a standard funnel, right, you have kind of your different steps. The consumer fills out that form, and then you kind of ping that data, let's say based on the attributes of that consumer profile. That is what is being looked at very closely from the FCC as, is this legal? Is this viable? Because this consumer may be on like the do not contact list, but now they have provided consent to this one particular site, and that consent is being passed to multiple parties. So that's why the FCC sees this as a loophole, because they didn't necessarily provide direct consent to that particular partner that has now downstream received their consumer information. It was buried in terms and conditions, privacy policies, but they weren't necessarily fully aware that their consumer information was being passed to another party. And that's what the FCC is really looking to potentially shut down. And so, yes, ping trees would be affected. Again, data aggregators, those that are selling data, that can all be affected by this particular law. And it's really significant. And I know that there's a lot of organizations out there that are honestly trying to fight or adjust these rulings, because it could be billions in effect that really are up for debate when it comes to this particular law passing.
Yeah, wow, that will be so disruptive. But luckily, we have you keeping an eye on it also, sharing this with us. Then I think the real-time bidding, we kind of just went over that topic.
Oh, sorry about that. I thought that was muted. Yeah, so real-time bidding. I think that this is something a little bit different when it comes to the pay-per-call industry. So real-time bidding is exactly what it is. It's basically a programmatic method of buying live calls. So what's happening with real-time bidding, where we saw previously calls being bought really on a ping post basis, real-time bidding is kind of now being adopted by the carriers, the large aggregators, because they're no longer wanting to take the good, bad, and the ugly. So what happens in that environment is there is a caller ID that is pinged to that particular end buyer. Typically, it has a zip code, state information, so they can kind of disseminate if that is a particular call that they want to take at all, or how much they're willing to pay for that particular call. So real-time bidding is going to be, I think, the wave of the future. It's here now. We saw significant growth and adoption from just last year AEP to this year, 500% growth plus at minimum. We've seen when it comes to real-time bidding and adopting. I think that the ways of static bidding, where basically someone has a singular phone number, they're given that phone number, and that seller pumps in that distribution. It's not going to happen, I think, that linear anymore. It's really going to be that dynamic environment where there's specific information that's being passed with that caller ID, and then now that end buyer can make the decisions if that's an appropriate lead. And I mean, some very large Fortune 100 companies that are on the Ringba platform are being able to leverage this technology to honestly predict the outcome of a policyholder before it even reaches an agent. Between their machine learning, we at Ringba have something called Instant Caller Profile. We're able to append data in real time that's even beyond just a state or zip code. Now we know, hey, it's Jenny's. She's in Southern California. She's got 2 kids and 2 cars in the household. Now this really robust profile is something that is going to allow these end buyers to make a more intelligent and rapid fire decision if that is a qualified consumer for their particular product. And again, this is all happening in milliseconds. So real-time bidding, it's here, it's growing, it's definitely the future. I highly encourage those that are in the pay-per-call environment that they take a strong look at how real-time bidding is being adopted by the biggest buyers in our industry.
Wow. So it's really moving that bidding system up the funnel to the point of when that person calls, the inbound call. Yep. That's amazing. Exactly. Okay. And where do you see PPC in 2024 in terms of regulation and also new technologies like you were just talking about?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that what we're going to see in 2024 is growth in pay-per-call overall. I know some significant players in this space that typically have only bought leads and clicks, and now call programs are dominating everything that they do. They're seeing that gravitation towards a consumer down the funnel, how that affects their end goals, and ensuring that that is now part of their overall budgets and kind of acquisition plans. So we're going to definitely see growth within the industry. We're also going to see some consolidation. I think that the regulatory environments are going to be challenging for some of those. I think that our industry is savvy and flexible, but I think that there is going to be consolidation that we're going to see in 2024, where companies that were leveraging other practices or certain types of mediums, they may not have that capability to drive acquisition in those particular channels. And so we're going to see some consolidation of how they're actually performing their acquisition plans. So, and in addition to that, I think we're going to see some consolidation, just like in an exchange environment. The Ringba X exchange is a perfect example of how we're seeing the demand for consolidation for not potentially running huge programs where someone is having to run like a 50 to 100 person affiliate program. They're looking for that consolidation, and the exchange is going to be something that is really a solution and an answer to consolidating those particular relationships and being able to acquire live inbound calls all in one place. So I think we're going to continue to see that. And I think the inbound landscape is only going to grow from here. I think that warm transfers is definitely something that within certain categories, verticals, and industries is still going to be prominent. But I do see inbounds really being the leader when it comes to acquisition and pay-per-call. I would say 95% of the time, the buyers I'm dealing with are looking for that inbound call. So we're going to see some growth there. And I think that when it comes from a regulatory standpoint, I believe that CMS will continue to look at ways to optimize how the health insurance vertical is really operating from a marketing standpoint, tightening those guidelines. They continue to make changes on an annual basis. So I think we should anticipate that. I think that this lead generation loophole FCC law may come into picture in 2024. So I think it's something, again, that we certainly want to keep an eye on. And any expansion within the TCPA guidelines, even CCPA, that we may see more regulatory impact on a state level, like we have in California. So we really have to kind of be vigilant in regards to those changes and adjustments, because there is going to be an impact from, business practices to how we're going about even our business development process of who do we really want to partner with, who understand the landscape there. And the buyers, the demand is really going to be looking for the experts in the room. And so I encourage everybody to kind of do their homework, get ahead of the curve. And I think that will make 2024 and a really prominent and fantastic year for a lot of folks out there. So
wow, a lot to look forward to, but also dig into.
yes, for sure.
So my last question, well, it's not my last question about PPC, is what advice do you have for those who are interested in doing more with PPC?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to pay per call, now I'm going to try to answer this not so biased, but technology is critical. Obviously we at Ringba, we feel like we're very innovative in this space here. We've helped businesses grow from nothing to $100 million businesses in the pay per call space. So, but outside of that, the technology is very critical. I think that it's important for tracking, attribution, making sure that you kind of understand where the media levers are happening when it comes from an acquisition standpoint. It's important to track all of these things properly. That's why Everflow is so important in the lead and click space, and Ringba in the call space. It's critical to have that insight to make sure that media buying that is so incredibly expensive, those dollars are being maximized as much as possible to make it a sustainable business. So that's certainly one piece of advice. The other thing is, I ran an affiliate network for 15 years. Keep it clean. I think that's something where I've seen some inflammatory creatives out there when it comes to pay per call, and it's very short lived. The difference here is that, I think that there is a little bit of I guess a method of trying to get away with those really aggressive angles and things like that in traditional lead generation, other forms of media, whereas calls is very different. Someone can listen to a recording, they can in real time understand that consumer experience. And so I think it's important for those that are growing in the pay per call space, the aggressive angles, those are probably going to be very short lived, and they're kind of easily caught. So I think that don't waste your time trying to figure out how to sneak in this really aggressive angle. You're not getting a Tesla when you're signing up for ACAs. So let's stop promoting those type of things. I think that figuring out how to really dive in from an audience standpoint is going to be the clear path of how proper acquisition is going to happen in this space. I think that it's all going to come down to being creative, making sure your content is top notch. And I highly recommend leveraging AI. AI is not here to take over the world. We're not going to be eaten by robots. It's not going to happen. But I highly encourage those that are diving into content development and even just facilitating better business practices and kind of understanding even some of these regulatory landscapes. AI is there to help us. I think it's something that all of us should be embracing and leveraging. When it comes to beginning to end. I think that there is a lot of different benefits that we can gain from AI. I highly recommend that those that haven't really dove into that, get into it. It's going to be the big thing for 2024 and beyond. And so I think it's something that we can all leverage for the benefit of our businesses and even just our daily lives.
Yeah, totally agree. AI is here and we might as well use it. It's going to put you behind if you're not.
Definitely.
So to wrap up this fireside chat, what is one thing you'd want people to remember that we've gone over this past 30 minutes?
Yeah, I think I'd like them to know and remember that inbound calls are here, they're growing. I think it's important from buyer to seller to adopt this as part of their acquisition plans. I think that there's only growth behind it. And that regulatory market, educate yourself. I really think knowledge is power. And so if I can have any of these, our audience members walk away with anything, inbound is worth the investment, and educate yourself to make sure that you understand the landscape of that, that particular industry. So.
Great. And how can people get in touch with you if they want to chit chat about the regulatory changes happening?
Sure. So pretty easy. I'm Jenny@ringba.com. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. Look me up, Jenny Parrish. I'm very, very active. I'm very responsive. But yeah, anybody that wants to have a conversation, I'd love to dive into this more with them. If they need some guidance, advice, I'm happy to provide it. While I cannot provide legal advice, there's some experts out there in our industry that are far better at that than I am. I can give them some soft guidance in regards to what to anticipate, what to expect, and how to really grow within the paper call ecosystem.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing all this information.
Sure.
I learned a lot. I hope everyone that's watching did. And yeah, everyone will get a video to this and a link on our website, and with more information how to get in touch with Ringba and Jenny if you have specific questions. So thank you, and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.